A terrified neigh sliced through the afternoon silence. Marcus glanced at his Rolex. He didn't have time for this. But when he saw the giant snake attacking the helpless horse, something inside him shattered. Before we dive into this story of transformation, let me know where you're watching from. Go ahead and get comfortable. And please don't forget to support us by hitting that like button if you believe compassion can change lives. So, you ready? Let's begin. The black BMW purred softly down the dirt road, completely out of place in the rural Texas landscape. Marcus Thornfield adjusted the air conditioning and checked his watch again. This detour would cost him at least 2 hours on his tight schedule, but the main interstate was blocked by construction. "Damn incompetence," he muttered, drumming his fingers on the Italian leather steering wheel. His grey eyes scanned the landscape with disdain. Empty fields, broken fences, a few scattered cattle. To him, it represented everything he despised: inefficiency, waste, a lack of progress. The phone rang, and he answered on speakerphone without taking his eyes off the road. "Marcus, did you get the merger documents?" The anxious voice of his lawyer echoed in the car. "Obviously. The meeting is at 6. I don't tolerate delays." His voice was sharp, leaving no room for questions. "About the factory layoffs. 350 people. It's already decided. Operational efficiency is non-negotiable." Marcus hung up without ceremony. 50 years of life had taught him a simple lesson. Feelings are a luxury successful men cannot afford. Every decision was based on numbers, every move calculated to maximize profit. That was how you built a $2 billion empire. Suddenly, a strange noise from the engine made the car sputter. The BMW began to lose power, forcing him to pull over onto the dusty shoulder. "This can't be happening," he said through gritted teeth, calling his insurance provider. A 15-minute hold. The tow truck would take at least an hour to reach this god-forsaken region. He got out of the car and loosened his silk tie. The heat of the Texas countryside was suffocating compared to the vehicle's climate control. He looked around with growing irritation. There was no decent cell service, no sign of civilization on the horizon. That's when he heard it. A sound that cut through the air like a blade, a sharp, desperate neigh, filled with pure terror. Marcus frowned. It wasn't an ordinary sound. It had an urgency, a life-or-death quality. The sound came again, closer, from a field on the other side of a barbed wire fence. Against all his instincts of self-preservation and practicality, he headed toward the noise. "Not my problem," he muttered, but his feet were already carrying him to the fence. Climbing through the barbed wire, tore his designer slacks and scratched his arm, but he barely noticed. As he got closer, the sound became more desperate, interspersed with a hissing noise that made his blood run cold. When he finally saw the source of the noise, his world stopped. Just 50 yards away, a magnificent chestnut horse was trapped in the fence, its hind legs tangled in the twisted metal. But that wasn't the worst part. Coiled around its front legs, a giant snake, at least 13 feet long, was tightening its muscular body against the helpless animal. The horse thrashed in total panic, its eyes wide with terror, white foam dripping from its mouth. With every desperate move to free itself, the wire dug deeper into its skin, leaving trails of blood on its golden coat. Marcus stood paralyzed. In his entire pragmatic, calculated life, he had never witnessed something so raw, so desperately real. The snake raised its head, its scales glistening in the sun, and for a terrifying moment, its eyes met his. The horse let out another neigh, this time weaker, more resigned. It was losing the fight. "Not my problem," Marcus repeated, but his words sounded hollow, empty. He took a step back, then another. He could just return to his car, wait for the tow truck, and pretend he never saw a thing. But as he was turning away, the horse looked directly at him. And in that gaze was something Marcus hadn't seen in decades, a silent plea, an inexplicable trust that this man in an expensive suit could be its salvation. For a moment that felt like an eternity. Marcus Thornfield, the man who fired hundreds without blinking, who destroyed family businesses without remorse, felt something crack inside his chest, a tiny fissure in an armor built over decades. The horse was dying, and for the first time in a very long time, Marcus couldn't just turn his back and walk away. Marcus stood motionless for long seconds, his analytical brain stuck in an impossible loop. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to walk away, get back in the car, and wait for the tow truck like a civilized man. But his feet remained glued to the ground, as if an invisible force were holding him there. The snake noticed his presence and raised its head higher, its fangs glinting menacingly. The horse, sensing the man's hesitation, let out a low, prolonged whimper, a sound Marcus felt reverberate somewhere deep in his forgotten soul. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his graying hair. "I'm not some action hero. I'm a businessman." But even as he spoke, his eyes couldn't break away from the animal. It was a magnificent horse, clearly of good stock, with defined muscles under its golden coat. It was probably worth a small fortune. The mercenary thought came automatically, but was quickly overwhelmed by something more primal. The horse tried to move again, and the snake tightened its deadly embrace. A trickle of blood ran down the animal's leg, staining the dry earth red. Marcus took off his expensive jacket and threw it on the ground. He loosened his tie and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt. His movements were mechanical, as if his body had made a decision his rational mind couldn't yet process. He looked around for a makeshift weapon. A thick branch lay a few yards away, apparently torn from a tree by a recent storm. It felt heavy in his soft hands, unaccustomed to anything heavier than a Mont Blanc pen. "Okay," he said to himself, his voice trembling slightly. "I'll do this once. Just once." He approached slowly, trying to remember everything he'd ever seen about snakes in documentaries he'd idly watched on transatlantic flights. Don't attack from the front. No sudden movements. Aim for the head. The snake sensed his approach and hissed louder, a sound that made every cell in Marcus's body scream for him to run. But the horse chose that moment to look at him again, and in its eyes there was something beyond desperation. There was hope. "Don't do this for me," Marcus whispered to the animal. I'm not a good person." As if it understood, the horse lowered its head slightly, in a gesture that could be interpreted as either trust or resignation. Marcus raised the branch, feeling its inadequate weight in his inexperienced hands. The snake was less than 10 feet away now, its attention divided between its captured prey and the new threat. Its muscles tensed, preparing to strike. "Let's go," Marcus muttered, unsure if he was talking to himself, the horse, or the universe at large. He took a step forward, then another. The snake coiled, ready to lunge. The horse was nearly still now, its breathing heavy and labored. Dark patches of sweat were beginning to appear on its coat. Marcus lifted the branch over his head, and in that moment, his entire world shrank to those few square feet of dirt. There were no more meetings, mergers, layoffs, or spreadsheets. There was no financial empire or reputation to protect. There was only a man, a horse in agony, and a giant snake. The snake made the first move, shifting its attention from the horse to launch itself toward Marcus. He saw the fangs coming at him in slow motion, saw the reptile's cold, calculating eyes, saw his own death approaching. And for the first time in decades, Marcus Thornfield didn't think about consequences, didn't calculate risks or probabilities. He simply acted on pure instinct, moved by something he thought had died inside him long ago. The branch came down with all the force he could muster, and the impact echoed across the silent field like a gunshot. The impact was solid, The branch struck the snake right behind the head with a sickening thud that made Marcus flinch. The serpent thrashed violently, letting out a sharp hiss that cut the air like a siren. For a terrifying moment, Marcus thought he had only made it angrier. But then the snake slightly loosened its grip around the horse's legs. Disoriented by the blow, it was the chance Marcus needed. Without a second thought, he brought the branch down again, this time even harder. The serpent finally released the horse completely and turned to face its attacker. Marcus saw the cold, furious eyes lock onto him and felt his blood run cold. The snake was even bigger than he had imagined, almost 15 feet of pure muscle and fury. "Great," he muttered, backing away slowly. "Now it's mad at me." The horse, free from the deadly embrace but still caught in the fence, tried to move and nearly collapsed. Its legs were injured and bleeding, but it was alive. For now. The snake prepared for another strike, this time clearly focused on Marcus. He raised the branch again, his hands trembling not just from fear, but from adrenaline. He had never felt so alive and so terrified at the same time. The snake's second strike came faster than the first. Marcus tried to dodge, but he wasn't quick enough. The animal's tail whipped around and caught him in the ribs, throwing him against the barbed wire fence. The pain was instant and excruciating. The metal tore through his expensive shirt, leaving red trails down his back. "Damn it!" he gasped, trying to get to his feet. His vision was slightly blurred, and he could feel warm blood trickling down his back. The snake closed in again, more cautious this time, assessing its wounded prey. Marcus knew he didn't stand much of a chance in a prolonged fight. He had to end this quickly, or both he and the horse would be dead in minutes. That's when he noticed a pile of rocks near a broken fence post. Without letting go of the branch, he started hurling rocks at the snake one after another. Most missed, but a few connected, causing enough confusion to keep it at a distance. "Come on," he yelled at the horse, who was watching him with wide eyes. "Help me out here." As if it understood, the horse began to struggle against the wires again, this time with more determination. The noise and movement distracted the snake just long enough for Marcus to get a better position. With a yell that came from the depths of his lungs, a primal sound he didn't know he was capable of making, Marcus lunged at the snake, swinging the branch with both hands. The final blow struck the reptile's head with enough force to stun it completely. The snake writhed for a few seconds before going still. Marcus stood over it for a long moment, the branch still raised, waiting for it to move again. But it didn't. When he was finally sure the threat was gone, Marcus dropped the branch and staggered toward the horse. His knees were shaking, his hands were covered in cuts and scrapes, and his back throbbed with pain. The horse watched him approach with an expression Marcus had never seen in any living being before, pure, unconditional gratitude. There was no calculation, no expectation of return, just a silent acknowledgement that its life had been saved. "All right," Marcus murmured, his voice hoarse. "Now let's get you out of there." But as he knelt to examine the tangle of barbed wire around the animal's legs, Marcus realized the hardest part was just beginning. And for the first time in his life, that didn't scare him. In fact, he felt strangely determined to see it through. The wires were intricately woven around the horse's hind legs, some pieces dug into the flesh like metal claws. Marcus analyzed the situation with the same precision he used to evaluate risky investments, but this time the outcome wouldn't be measured in dollars. "Easy now," he whispered to the animal, which flinched as his hands neared the wounds. "I'm not going to hurt you." The words came out naturally, surprising him. When was the last time he had spoken gently to anyone? When was the last time he had genuinely cared about not causing pain? He started working on the first piece of wire, carefully trying to unwind each loop. The metal was hot under the afternoon sun and slick with blood. With every movement, the horse tensed slightly, but didn't try to pull away. It was as if it understood this injured man was trying to help. You have a name? Marcus asked, aware of how absurd it sounded to be talking to an animal. Probably got an owner around here, huh? He glanced around, looking for signs of a nearby farm or house. The landscape was vast and seemingly empty, punctuated only by distant groves of trees and rolling hills. How did this horse end up here? Why was it alone? He managed to free the first piece of wire and tossed it aside. The horse let out a soft snort that might have been relief. 3 more pieces remained, each more tangled than the last. I don't usually do this, Marcus continued talking, noticing that his voice seemed to calm the animal. I don't usually help anyone, really. Just yesterday I laid off 300 employees, signed the papers without even looking at the names. His hands paused for a moment. Why was he confessing this to a horse? Why did that fact, something he had considered a business victory this morning, suddenly sound so wrong? They have families, he went on, returning to the wire. Kids, mortgages, dreams, and I destroyed it all with one signature. The second piece of wire came loose, taking a few golden hairs with it. The horse didn't make a sound, just turned its head slightly toward Marcus, as if it were listening. Marcus's phone buzzed, the jarring sound breaking the strange intimacy of the moment. He glanced at the screen. It was his assistant, probably worried about the delay. After 3 rings, he simply declined the call and put the device on silent. First time I've ever ignored a work call, he muttered. My assistant is going to have a heart attack. The third piece of wire was deeper, creating a cut that was bleeding steadily. Marcus had to be even more careful, his hands working with a delicacy he didn't know he possessed. The horse remained still, completely trusting this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere to save it. As he worked, Marcus started noticing details he had missed in the adrenaline of the fight. The horse's coat was incredibly soft, a shade of gold that shimmered in the sun. Its eyes were large and expressive, a deep brown that seemed to reflect an almost human intelligence. It was clearly a well-cared-for animal, or at least it had been at some point. "How'd you end up here?" he asked, more to himself than to the horse. "Run away from somewhere, get lost?" The last piece of wire was particularly stubborn. Marcus had to lie on his stomach in the dirt to get a better angle, completely ignoring the grime now staining his expensive white shirt. On any other day, this would have infuriated him. Today, he barely noticed. When he finally managed to free the last wire, both Marcus and the horse sighed in relief. The animal tried to take a step and faltered slightly, but managed to stay on its feet. Its wounds were visible, but they didn't seem to compromise its ability to walk. Marcus stood up and backed away a few steps, giving the horse space to move. For a moment, they just looked at each other, 2 wounded creatures sharing a moment of mutual understanding. "There," Marcus said simply, "you're free." But when the horse took a few hesitant steps and then stopped, looking back at him, Marcus realized the situation was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The horse didn't move away. Instead, it stood a few feet away, watching Marcus with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. It was as if the animal was waiting for something, but Marcus had no idea what. "Go on," he said, gesturing with his hands. "You're free. Go back where you came from." But the horse just shook its head, as if to say no. It took a few steps closer and gently nudged Marcus's shoulder with its muzzle. The gesture was so unexpected that Marcus almost lost his balance. "What do you want?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Food? Water?" As if it understood the word water, the horse turned its head toward a small depression in the ground where the sun's reflection was visible. Marcus followed its gaze and saw a pool of water, likely from a recent rain. Together, they walked slowly to the water. The horse drank eagerly while Marcus sat on a nearby rock, finally allowing exhaustion to wash over him. His back ached, his hands were covered in cuts, and his shirt was unrecognizable. He glanced at his watch. It had been almost an hour since the car broke down. An hour that had changed something. He couldn't quite define what, but he felt a fundamental shift inside him. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was his office number. Marcus hesitated for a long moment before answering. "Where the hell are you?" His partner's voice was sharp with irritation. "The meeting starts in 3 hours. "My car broke down," Marcus replied, his voice calmer than he expected. "I'm waiting for a tow." "Broke down where? I'll send a car to pick you up now." Marcus looked around, the empty field, the horse drinking water, the dead snake a few yards away. How could he possibly explain any of this? "I don't know exactly where I am," he said, realizing it was partly true. "Out in the country. The signal is bad. I'll get there as soon as I can." "Marcus, this merger is worth 400 million. You can't just—" "I know what it's worth," Marcus cut in, but without his usual harshness. "It'll have to wait." He hung up before his partner could reply, and stared at the phone for a long moment before turning it off completely. The horse had finished drinking and was now approaching again. This time, it lay down in the grass next to the rock where Marcus was sitting, a gesture of complete trust. Marcus hesitantly reached out and touched the animal's neck. The coat was even softer than it looked. "You shouldn't trust me," Marcus murmured. "I'm not a good person. Just this morning I destroyed the lives of hundreds of people. Didn't even blink." The horse turned its head toward him, as if listening to every word. 43 years building this empire," Marcus continued, surprised at his own openness. "Ever since my parents died, I convinced myself that nothing mattered but success. Money, power, control, everything I thought would protect me from feeling anything." He stopped petting the horse and looked at his own hands, dirty, scratched, stained with blood, hands that signed million-dollar contracts, that closed deals, that changed lives, that had never been soiled by anything more substantial than ink. "My parents had a small farm," he said, his voice softer now. "They lost everything when I was 7. I swore I'd never be that vulnerable again, never depend on anything but myself." The horse shifted slightly, pressing its muzzle against Marcus's hand. The gesture was comforting in a way he couldn't explain. "And now I'm here, talking to a horse about my existential problems." Marcus laughed humorlessly. "If my board of directors could see me now." In the distance, he could hear the sound of an approaching engine. The tow truck, probably. Soon he would be back to his normal life, his meetings, his ruthless mergers. Everything would go back to the way it was. But as he looked at the horse, who was now watching him with those deep, understanding eyes, Marcus knew that nothing would ever be the same. Something had woken up inside him, something he thought he had buried forever, and for the first time in decades, it didn't scare him. In fact, he felt a strange curiosity about what would come next. The sound of the engine grew louder until a tow truck finally appeared on the dusty road. The driver waved from the cab, clearly relieved to have found the expensive car in the middle of nowhere. Marcus stood up slowly, his joints protesting. The horse rose too, positioning itself beside him like a loyal companion. It was a simple gesture, but it was loaded with meaning. The animal had chosen to stay with him. "Hey there, boss!" the tow truck driver shouted, a middle-aged man in worn work clothes. "What happened here? Looks like you got in a fight with a fence." Marcus looked down at himself and realized how he must appear. Shirt torn and blood-stained, pants caked with dirt, scratches visible on his arms. It was an appearance that would have horrified him just hours before. "Just some technical difficulties," he replied, walking toward the road. The horse followed him naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The driver stopped short when he noticed the animal. "Is that one yours? Beautiful horse. Looks like you two had quite an adventure." Marcus hesitated. Technically, the horse wasn't his, but he couldn't just leave it here, injured and alone. "It's complicated," he said finally. As the driver set up the winch, Marcus approached the horse again. "Look, I have to go now," he said quietly. "Go home, okay? Wherever that is." But when he started to walk away, the horse followed. Marcus stopped and turned. "No, you can't come with me. I live in a condo, downtown. It's no place for a horse." The animal stood still for a moment, then walked over and gently pressed its head against Marcus's chest. The gesture was so human, so full of emotion, that Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "Hey, boss," the driver called out. "There's a farm just up the road, belongs to old Jack. I bet he knows this horse. Want me to give you a lift over there?" Marcus looked at the horse, then at the driver, then back at the horse. The sensible answer was no. He had a crucial meeting, business waiting, an empire to run. But when he looked into the animal's eyes, the answer came out on its own. "Yes, let's stop by there." The farm was only 3 miles away, a small property with a simple house and a few weathered wooden buildings. The driver honked, and an elderly man came out to greet them, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. "Jack!" the driver yelled. "Brought a fella here who found a lost horse." The old farmer looked at the animal and his face lit up. "Golden, my goodness, where have you been, boy?" The horse nickered softly in recognition, but stayed close to Marcus. Jack approached, extending a hand to shake. "Thank you so much for finding him, Mr. Marcus," he replied simply, shaking the man's calloused hand. "How did he get out?" "Terrible storm last week knocked down part of the fence. Woke up to find 3 horses gone. Managed to get 2 back, but Golden, he's always been the adventurous one." Jack laughed, patting the animal's neck. "But what happened to you two? You look like you've been through a war." Marcus told the story of the snake, editing out some of the more dramatic details. Jack listened with growing admiration. "Giant snake, you say? Must have been a boa constrictor. We get 'em around here sometimes, especially in the summer. You saved his life, no doubt about it." Marcus felt a strange warmth in his chest at the farmer's words. When was the last time someone had looked at him with genuine admiration, not based on his net worth or power? "Golden's always been special," Jack continued. "My late wife used to say he had a human soul. Looks like he's chosen you as a friend." As if to confirm his words, the horse moved closer to Marcus again and gently nudged his hand with its muzzle. Jack smiled. "You know what's funny? In 30 years of raising horses, I've never seen Golden take to someone so fast. He's usually wary of strangers." Marcus looked at the animal, feeling something inexplicable happen in his chest. It was as if the horse saw something in him that he couldn't see himself. "Listen," Jack said, scratching his grey beard. "Golden's clearly taken a liking to you. How about you stay for dinner? My daughter Sarah makes the best stew in the county. You both look like you could use a decent meal." Marcus was about to refuse automatically. He had the meeting, the documents. $400 million waiting for his signature, but when he glanced at his watch, he realized it was nearly 5 in the afternoon. Even if he left now, he wouldn't make it in time. Actually, that would be wonderful," he heard himself say. Jack beamed. "Perfect. Sarah should be in the kitchen. Come on, I'll show you where you can wash up." As they walked toward the house, Golden followed them naturally. The property was simple but well kept. A small vegetable garden, a chicken coop out back, a few fruit trees. It was the kind of place Marcus would normally dismiss as inefficient or underutilized. Today, it felt welcoming. Sarah turned out to be a woman in her 40s with a warm smile and hands that were always busy. When Jack explained the story of the snake, she insisted on examining Marcus's wounds, treating them with a maternal kindness that left him feeling awkward. "When was the last time someone took care of you?" she asked as she cleaned a particularly deep cut on his arm. The question caught him off guard. When was it? He had a housekeeper who looked after his condo, a driver, a personal assistant, but cared for him as a person with genuine concern. He couldn't remember. It's been a while, he admitted. During dinner, Marcus found himself talking about his life in a way he never had before. He spoke of his financial empire, but also of the loneliness, of the success, but also of the growing sense of emptiness. Jack and Sarah listened without judgment, asking genuine questions and offering perspectives he'd never considered. "You know," Jack said between spoonfuls of stew, "my father always said a man can conquer the whole world, but if he loses his soul in the process, he's conquered nothing at all." Marcus chewed slowly, savoring both the food and the words. "And how do you hold on to your soul?" "Connections," Sarah answered immediately. "With people, with animals, with the land, with something bigger than yourself." After dinner, Jack suggested they visit the stable to check on Golden's injuries. The place was simple but clean, with several stalls occupied by horses of different ages and colors. The smell of hay and leather was comforting in a primal way. Golden settled into his familiar stall, but his eyes never left Marcus for a moment. It was as if the animal was memorizing every detail of the man who had saved his life. "He won't forget you," Jack said, noticing the connection. "Horses have a long memory for kindness." Marcus reached a hand through the stall bars, and Golden immediately came forward for a pet. "I didn't know I was capable of kindness," he said quietly. "Of course you are, everyone is. Sometimes we just need to be reminded." That night, Jack offered the guest room, and Marcus accepted without hesitation. He called his assistant, explaining that he was dealing with urgent personal matters and that the meeting would have to be postponed. The frustration in the voice on the other end of the line didn't affect him as it normally would. Lying in the simple but comfortable bed, Marcus stared at the ceiling for hours. Through the window, he could hear the sounds of the farm at night, crickets, the wind in the trees, the soft movements of the animals. It was the first true silence he had experienced in years. He thought about the dinner conversation, about Jack's words on connections and soul. He thought about Golden, how the animal had trusted him instinctively. He thought about the 300 employees he had laid off that morning and felt, for the first time, the true weight of that decision. A few hours before dawn, he made a decision. He picked up his phone and typed a message to his assistant. "Cancel the layoffs, find another solution, we'll discuss on Monday." He sent the message and put the phone aside. For the first time in decades, he slept deeply, without dreaming of numbers or spreadsheets. Instead, he dreamed of golden fields and understanding eyes, and he woke up feeling more rested than he had in years. Marcus woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the soft morning light filtering through the linen curtain. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then it all came back. The snake Golden, the family who had taken him in like one of their own. He put on his still dirty clothes from the day before and walked out toward the stable. He needed to see the horse again, to confirm that none of it had been an elaborate dream. Golden was awake, as if he had been waiting for him. The animal nickered softly when he saw Marcus approach, a sound that could have been joy or recognition. "Good morning to you too," Marcus murmured, unlatching the stall and stepping inside. Golden came over immediately, pressing his head against his chest in the same affectionate gesture from the day before. Marcus checked the wounds. They were healing well, with no sign of infection. "You're going to be okay," he said, stroking the silky neck. "Better than me, probably." "Up early," came Jack's voice from behind him. The farmer walked over, carrying a bucket of water. "Coffee's ready up at the house if you want some." "Thank you. I just wanted to check on him." Jack smiled knowingly. "Hard to stay away once you've made a connection, isn't it?" "Over breakfast," Marcus found himself asking questions about the farm, about raising horses, about life in the country. Jack answered patiently, clearly pleased by the genuine interest. "Always wanted to have horses," Jack said. "My father had a small stable when I was a boy. When he passed, I had to sell everything to pay off debts. Took me 20 years of saving to buy this land and start over. It hasn't been easy," Sarah added, pouring more coffee, "especially with the drought the last few years. We're down to 8 horses, used to have 15. Marcus did some quick mental calculations. "Financial trouble?" Jack hesitated. "Nothing we can't handle with time and hard work." But Marcus could see past the diplomatic words. He recognized the signs of a struggling operation: old equipment, fences in need of repair, the subtle tension in Jack's eyes when he spoke of the future. After breakfast, he insisted on helping with the morning chores. He had never fed horses before, never mucked out a stall or carried hay. His executive hands protested the manual labor, but he pushed through, finding a strange satisfaction in the simplicity of the tasks. Golden followed him everywhere, like a loyal dog. Whenever Marcus paused to rest, the horse would position himself at his side, offering silent companionship. "I've never seen anything like it," Sarah remarked, watching the pair. "It's like you've known each other your whole lives." Around noon, the tow truck returned with the repaired BMW. Marcus looked at the gleaming car, a symbol of his old life, and felt an inexplicable reluctance to get in. "I should get going," he said to Jack, but the words lacked conviction. "The door's always open," Jack replied, "for you and any friend of yours." Marcus said goodbye to Sarah with a hug, another gesture that surprised him with its naturalness. Then he headed to the stable for the most difficult farewell. Golden seemed to understand. It was goodbye. He stood still as Marcus petted him, his large eyes fixed on the face of the man who had saved his life. "Thank you," Marcus whispered, "for reminding me of who I used to be, or who I could be." He left the stall and walked toward the car without looking back, knowing that if he did, he wouldn't be able to leave. But as he started the engine, he heard a loud, desperate neigh from the stable. Golden had jumped the stall fence and was now standing just outside the stable, watching the car with an expression that could only be described as a plea. Marcus shut off the engine and got out of the car. Jack came running, clearly concerned by the animal's unusual behavior. "I've never seen him do that," he said, out of breath. "Golden's always been obedient, never jumped a fence in his life." Marcus looked at the horse, at Jack, at the car that would take him back to his life of meetings and cold decisions, and for the second time in 2 days he felt something inside him make a choice before his rational mind could intervene. "Jack," he said slowly, "how much do you want for him?" Jack was silent for a long moment, processing the question. Golden, as if understanding his fate was being decided, walked over to Marcus and rested his head on his shoulder. "Marcus," Jack said carefully, "are you sure? Taking care of a horse isn't like owning a car or a condo. It's a lifetime responsibility." "I know," Marcus replied, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. "And I have no idea what I'm doing, but look at him. He's already decided." Sarah walked over, drawn by the conversation. When she understood what was happening, she smiled with a mix of joy and sadness. "Golden was born here," she said softly. "He was the first foal we raised when we arrived. He's 8 years old now. He's like a son to us. And Darren, that's exactly why I want to make sure he goes to the right place," Jack added. "It's not about the money, Marcus. It's about love." Marcus looked at the animal, who was now watching him with those deep, trusting eyes. "I don't know much about love," he admitted. "I've spent the last 40 years avoiding anything that looks like it. But this horse, he saved me as much as I saved him." "How so?" Sarah asked. Marcus hesitated, searching for the right words. Yesterday morning, when I woke up, I was a man who had everything and felt nothing, who built an empire by stepping on anyone who got in the way, who had completely forgotten what it means to care about another living being. He stroked Golden's neck, feeling the silky coat under his still scratched hands. When I saw that snake attacking him, something inside me woke up, something I thought was dead. And when it was over, when I looked in his eyes and saw pure gratitude, I realized I'd spent decades being grateful for nothing and to no one. Jack nodded slowly. And where would you keep him? The city's no place for a horse. I don't know, Marcus admitted. I'll have to figure it out. Maybe I'll buy some property in the hill country. Maybe I'll change my whole life. The words came out naturally, but as he heard them aloud, Marcus realized he was serious. For the first time in decades, he was considering a radical change, a decision based not on market analysis or profit potential, but on something intangible and profound. "I'll make you a proposal," Jack said after a long pause. "I won't sell Golden, but I'll go into partnership with you." Marcus raised his eyebrows, interested. "You said our operation needs financial help. You're right. We need an investor who understands this isn't just about money, but about a love for the animals. If you want to learn about horses, about this life, you can start right here." "A partnership how?" "You invest in the farm, make us viable again. In return, Golden stays here, but he's officially yours. You can visit him whenever you want, learn to care for him, understand what this responsibility means. If after a year you still want to take him with you, we can talk then." Sarah smiled, clearly approving of the idea. "It's perfect. Golden stays home, but he gets an owner who truly cares about him." Marcus considered the proposal. It was practical, sensible, and would allow him to maintain the connection with the animal that had changed his life. More importantly, it would be the first investment he'd ever made based on values that weren't purely financial. "There's one condition," he said. "I want to learn everything. How to care for him, how to train, how to understand horses. I don't want to be just a silent partner. You're welcome here any time you want to come." Jack extended his hand. "We have a lot to teach, and I suspect you have a lot to learn about yourself." Marcus shook the calloused hand, feeling the weight of the commitment he was making. Golden, as if approving of the deal, nickered softly and rubbed his head against both men. "Then it's settled," Marcus said, looking at the horse. "We're partners now, you and I. We'll figure out who we really are, together." It was a beginning, the first day of the rest of a life that promised to be completely different from anything he had ever known. And for the first time in decades, Marcus Thornfield was excited to see what came next. 6 months later, Marcus was in the stable at 5 in the morning, as had become his weekend habit. Golden greeted him with a familiar nicker, and Marcus responded with fresh carrots he now always carried in his pocket. The transformation had been gradual but profound. His weekends at the farm became sacred, time he fiercely protected from meetings and corporate obligations. His employees were initially shocked when he started declining calls on Saturdays and Sundays, something unthinkable in the past. "Good morning, my friend," he said to Golden, stroking the animal's neck. "Ready for our morning ride?" In the past few months, he had learned not just how to ride, but how to communicate with the horse in ways he never imagined possible. Every shift in weight, every breath, every change in posture had meaning. It was a language more honest than any corporate negotiation he had ever conducted. Jack approached, carrying the saddle. "How's the new school project coming along?" Marcus smiled. The new school project was his latest initiative, using a portion of his fortune to build a school in the nearby town where underprivileged children could learn not only traditional subjects, but also equine therapy and animal care. The City Council's approval came through yesterday. We break ground next month. It was strange how talking about that project filled him with a satisfaction that no multi-million-dollar merger ever had. Every dollar invested there represented lives that would be touched, children who would learn about compassion through horses. "And the company?" Jack asked, helping him saddle Golden. "Different," Marcus admitted. "Very different." And it was true. In recent months, he had implemented radical changes in his corporation: employee wellness programs, sustainability policies, investments in social projects. Some shareholders grumbled about the less aggressive approach, but the results spoke for themselves. Productivity was up, employee turnover had dropped drastically, and the company was being recognized as one of the best places to work. "You know," he said as he mounted Golden, "I got an interesting call yesterday. A journalist wants to do a story on my transformation, how a corporate shark became a conscious capitalist." "And what did you tell him?" "That he's asking the wrong question. It's not about transformation, it's about remembrance." They set out for their morning ride across the fields he now knew like the back of his hand. Golden responded to the slightest touch, the most subtle cues. It was a partnership built on mutual trust and respect, qualities Marcus had taken decades to rediscover. During the ride, he passed by the new property he had purchased, 100 acres adjacent to Jack's farm. It was where he would build his new home, simple but comfortable, where he could live closer to the life he had chosen to embrace. "What do you think?" he asked Golden, stopping near the spot where the house would be built. "Good view, isn't it?" The horse tossed his head as if in agreement, and Marcus laughed. Talking to Golden had become natural, a way to process thoughts and feelings he once kept locked away. On their way back, they found Sarah preparing breakfast. The simple kitchen had become his favorite place in the world, where genuine conversations happened, where stories were shared, where he had rediscovered the taste of food made with love. "A letter came for you," Sarah said, handing him an elegant envelope. It was from the board of an international animal welfare foundation, inviting him to become a member. In recent months, he had received several similar invitations, organizations that recognized his new direction and wanted his involvement. "Another chance to make a difference," Jack commented, reading over his shoulder. Marcus folded the letter and put it away. There would be time to decide on that. For now, he was content with the changes he had already made, with the simpler, more connected life he was building. After breakfast, he spent a few hours helping with the horses, a routine that had become as natural as checking emails once was. Each animal had its own personality, its own needs, and caring for them required total presence, something he had learned to value deeply. When it was time to head back to the city, Golden walked him to his car as he always did. Marcus said goodbye with a long hug, promising to return the following week. "Thank you," he whispered in the horse's ear, "for saving me." As he drove back, Marcus reflected on the journey. A year ago, he was a man who had everything and felt nothing. Today, he was someone who had discovered that true wealth couldn't be measured in numbers, but in genuine connections and real purpose. The road ahead stretched out, full of possibilities, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Thornfield was eager to see where it would lead, because he now knew that no matter how lost someone might be, there is always a chance for redemption. Sometimes, all it takes is one moment of courage to save a life, only to discover that in the process, you've saved your own. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. What snake do you need to face to save something precious in your own life? Remember, compassion not only transforms those we help, but most importantly, it transforms who we are. Share this message if you believe everyone deserves a second chance to find their humanity.